it's not based on something realistic. It comes from imagination, creativity. It's not based on, it can be based on real life events, but it can be a sort of abstract version of it.
I'm going to make an experimental film with elements of psychedelics. What would you expect to see?
Sorry, can you repeat that?
I'm going to create an experimental film with psychedelics. What would you expect to see?
I'd expect it to be a bit, what's the word? Not creepy, but eerie. Like to have a sort of eerie feel. Yeah.
What comes to mind when you think of Alice in Wonderland?
The original story, I would think, is quite happy. But then, you know, the adaptation with Johnny Depp, I think that one is quite, it's a bit more, it can have a dark side, which I like about it. Yeah.
Could you tell me a scene from Alice in Wonderland that stood out to you the most?
I think the Queen, when she, you know her line off with his head, yeah, where she just chopped off everyone's head, and she was like really savage about it. Yeah.
Could you tell me your favourite character from Alice in Wonderland and why?
Hatter, 100%. He's just weird, isn't he? He's just a wacko, and it just makes it more interesting, makes it more entertaining. Yeah.
Right. I'm going to create an experimental film with elements of Alice in Wonderland. What would you expect to see?
I'd expect to see. Is it involving like the actual characters? Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I'd expect the Hatter to have a certain sort of personality and aura about him, and I think it would have a little bit of comical elements because the whole story is a bit, you know, but also a sort of serious element as well.
Alright, thank you. What does the genre of fantasy mean to you?
Something quite exciting and different, and to me it brings memories of like Disney because that's what I'm used to with fantasy.
I'm making an experimental film with elements of psychedelics. What do you expect to see?
Honestly, I'm not sure. Probably something that's like kind of abstract and different. It could be seen to be quite scary as well.
What comes to mind when I say Alice in Wonderland?
Like childhood and really crazy and different and really amazing.
Could you tell me a scene from Alice in Wonderland that stood out to you the most and why?
The scene with the Mad Hatter and everyone around the table drinking tea, because I just think it's like a really iconic scene from the film.
Could you tell me your favourite character and why?
Alice, because my cousin always used to think she was Alice in Wonderland because her name was Alice.
I'm going to create an experimental film with elements of Alice in Wonderland. What would you expect to see?
It's probably a twist on the original story, so maybe something slightly more dark or something like that.
Okay, thank you. What does the genre of fantasy mean to you?
The genre of fantasy, it means, I don't know, it's kind of like mystical, so you always wonder what's going to happen, and so kind of like fantastical beasts like Harry Potter and all the wizards and stuff like that. I don't know.
I'm going to make an experimental film with elements of psychedelics. What would you expect to see?
If it's to do with fantasy, that'd be pretty cool. I can pretty much imagine, as you said, kind of like Alice in Wonderland theme, so almost like her being like terrorised. That's quite deep, but yeah.
What comes to mind when you think of Alice in Wonderland?
Alice in Wonderland, I think of probably the Queen of Hearts and the what is it called, the timekeeper, and how like times to keep. I can't explain stuff, but yeah, I'm not. Yeah.
Could you tell me a scene from Alice in Wonderland that stood out to you the most and why?
The last film, which is the timekeeper, and where I hate this. Okay, where he pretty much got all the, like, there's like different memories and like different people, and it represents each someone's time. As soon as he takes it away, it's pretty much gone. Yeah, quite deep and meaningful, but yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
Could you tell me your favourite character from Alice in Wonderland and why?
100% the Mad Hatter. It reminds me of me, literally. I might as well just, the female version of the Mad Hatter.
I'm going to create an experimental film with elements of Alice in Wonderland. What would you expect to see?
I would expect like really like being dramatic. Probably like, I don't know, flashing lights, all that kind of jazz. It'd be cool if like there would be like a ghost almost with Alice in Wonderland there. So like the dark version and like the happy version. That'd be quite cool.
There you go.
What does the genre fantasy mean to you?
Basically, like out of the world.
I'm making an experimental film with psychedelics. What would you expect to see?
Lots of trippy patterns and very dark, like humour. But I don't know how to explain it.
What comes to mind when you think of Alice in Wonderland?
A little girl and lots of weird characters of drugs.
Could you tell me a scene from Alice in Wonderland that stood out to you the most and why?
The Mad Hatter's tea party, because he was just like owning all of it, and Alice in Wonderland was just Alice was confused.
Could you tell me your favourite character and why?
The Mad Hatter, because he's mad, and he's very confusing, and you can't really know what he's trying to say.
Alright, I'm going to create an experimental film with elements of Alice in Wonderland. What would you expect to see?
Lots of experiments, and like a plot twist, hopefully.
Alright, what does the genre fantasy mean to you?
It's pretty lit. Just a lot of colours, a lot of mystical beasts, a lot of fight, a lot of unicorns and that.
Alright, I'm going to make an experimental film with psychedelics. What do you expect to see?
Well, psychedelics is going to be pretty trippy, isn't it? It's going to have like some pretty like mad spirals and colours.
Are you ready?
Yeah, on film.
Alright, what does the genre fantasy mean to you?
Like fairy tales and anything fantasy, like mythical creatures, etc.
Okay, I'm going to make an experimental film with elements of psychedelics. What do you expect to see?
Lots of bright, bold colours, moving shapes.
Okay, what comes to mind when you think of Alice in Wonderland?
Mythical creatures, imagination, creativity.
What does the genre fantasy mean to you?
The genre fantasy would be something past everyday norm, like it would be exaggerating the truth as well. So when you see a horse, they would perceive it as a unicorn, just to kind of make that extra more kind of, I want that to be like, it's something that you want more than anything, kind of stuff like you would expect from Harry Potter and stuff like that. A world that isn't really there.
Right, I'm going to create an experimental film with psychedelics. What would you expect to see?
Well, when I think of psychedelics, I would tend to think of a spiritual, like, time lapse. So when you think of psychedelics, you tend to think of an outer body spiritual experience and an inner body one as well, so you kind of feel very wholesome. You think of lights and reflections, and it's a lot of physical and understanding as well at the same time, depending on what people like to say they talk about taking.
What comes to mind when you think of Alice in Wonderland?
When I think of Alice in Wonderland, if I think of like the first books and stuff like that, like the first things that came out, you tend to think about how like the time it came out when women didn't really have much of a voice like they do now. You would tend to think of having such like a strong, independent, young female character as that as well, because she was so young. It gave younger girls, that generation of younger girls, the power to go, no, I am as strong as this character, and that's what I like to think about. And it also tends to give me more of a perspective on time as well.
Could you tell me a scene from Alice in Wonderland that stood out to you the most and why?
When I think of Alice in Wonderland, I think of more like the films now, because I grew up more watching the actual film itself. I remember more of the film anyway, not the animated one. when I think of that, I tend to think of like the ending with the boat, and that would be the one where the caterpillar, I can't remember his name right now, when the caterpillar comes out at the end as a butterfly in her actual everyday human world, like when she's on Earth instead of being in this other dimension, towards the end it's kind of like she's connecting those two and keeping them together, and it's when she is able to go off, I think it's to East India, that's the most favourite part for me.
Could you tell me your favourite character from Alice in Wonderland and why?
My favourite would be the Cheshire Cat, because it's so cat-like, but at the same time it's not. It's kind of, it's like not really there. It's really strange. It's connected to a cat, but at the same time it's just so bizarre and not every day.
I'm going to create an experimental film with elements of Alice in Wonderland. What would you expect to see?
Havoc and mayhem, complete madness.